Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.24 patch notes. So we're going to start off just going through what the actual changes are. And then I'm going to talk about sort of what I think is going on in the meta right now. What are some of the problems potentially? What are some of the solutions moving forward? And then I'll really quickly talk about some of the proposed changes to AD carry coming up over the next couple of patches that Meddler talks about. What do I think about those? Do I think it's going to change a lot in terms of the meta? And I'll talk a little bit about how the preseason is overall as we go through. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton, especially if you want other people to be able to find high quality, good content out there, not just clickbait stuff, but good, thoughtful reflections on the game to help you become a better player and appreciate the game more. There's unfortunately not a lot of that out there. There's some, but there's way too much clickbait stuff out there. So if you like and subscribe, it'll not only let you know when I come out with new videos, but it also helps other people find the content. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here, though. I'll talk about Nico in a separate video. The TLDR is I think she'll be okay. I don't think she's going to be that great a support. I think she might be an alright mid laner, but I'm going to have to run the numbers and just see her in action a little bit. I think she has some potential, but she doesn't strike me as like OP or anything right out the gate. But I'll have a separate video on her, so stay tuned for that. Okay. Aatrox is too overpowered right now. He definitely needs some hard nerfs. Like, this is a joke. This is supposed to be, you know, so that he can't really do the mid lane thing, you know, where you take smite and then start taking jungle camps. I think that's a really bad PR problem. I'll tell you what, let me go ahead and just start with what I think are the meta problems overall, and then we'll talk about whether or not the patch notes address that and what needs to happen sort of moving forward with these champions. Okay, so since I mentioned Aatrox, we'll go ahead and bring him up here. Aatrox has a lot of problems. Let me bring him up. He has been nerfed a little bit, but they're joke nerfs. So, like, one of them was, you know, they reduced the time on his ult from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. 10 seconds is way too long to have to kite this guy out. It's absolutely ridiculous, because he'll get Blade of the Ruined King early on. Or not Blade of the Ruined King. Ghost Blade, rather. Not Blade of the Ruined King. He'll get Ghost Blade, and then he's just impossible to kite out. He's going to run on you. He has so many different dashes that he can do. He gets, you know, 2 dashes off of his E, and then each one of these kind of moves him a little bit forward as well. And here's one of the major issues. If you look at the damage on this right here, you know, the maximum non-minion damage, 450% AD ratio with 393. And I don't even know if that includes the 50% bonus damage that you get if they're in the bonus areas. So there is some skill to him, to an extent where you want to hit them with the bonus areas whenever you can. But at the same time, it's just too easy to just get insane damage off of him. He doesn't use mana. So he doesn't really ever run out of resources in the laning phase. He gets a ton of extra healing. He does quite a bit of damage to tanks over time. He has some percentage damage, I think, on his passive. Yeah, he gets a percentage of maximum health. His ultimate basically gives him a free GA. In addition to all this extra damage. So he's just a massive violation. Like, the 3 things that a champion can't have to be balanced are mobility, damage, and survivability. If a champion has all 3 of those in abundance, it's overpowered, right? Because, you know, that's just too much. It's something that's hard to kill, that puts out a ton of damage, that's really difficult to outplay because it has so much mobility. You know, balanced champions that are strong will have maybe a couple of those. So, like, a tank that's pretty mobile, or like an assassin that has a lot of damage but's also mobile, but if you get a hold of him, you can kill him. So Aatrox violates all 3 of those, and I think he's one of the most OP champions right now. Now, one issue when you're evaluating these champions, and Freak was talking about this in his patch notes video, is that if you just look at win rates, right, then some of those champions aren't going to look that strong, right? Like, I think Aatrox is under a 50% win rate. If we look at, like, Aatrox top, which is sort of his most common position, it's under a 50% win rate. It does not feel like he's under a 50% win rate when you play with him. Because, like, a decent champion, a decent player, or someone who gets even at all ahead with him is just going to completely snowball the game. So it's like, yeah, he does have some counterplay, but I'll guarantee you when we start looking at All-Star Weekend, that's coming up this weekend, and if it stays this way going into the pro season, then he's going to completely take over. Like, he's a very, very strong champ, and he can be flexed to top and mid. But it's not just for pro play. He's just very oppressive in solo queue. Like, he needs to be nerfed. He needs to either do less damage or be more killable. But a lot of that's not going to show up in his percentage, right? And some things can have a really high percentage, but not be that overpowered. So, like Cassiopeia, for example, right now is a 54% win rate. But I'll guarantee you, if you see a lot of Cassiopeias in your game, she's probably not going to do that well right now. Because she's very difficult to play correctly. So I think that sometimes maybe some of the balance team gets caught up too much in win percentages. Like, yeah, they do tell some of the story, but like Master Yi has a 46% win. I guess that's in top lane rather than in the jungle, but I'm just saying that I don't think win rates tell the whole story, and it's pretty obvious that the champion is excessively powerful when used in the right situations. So I think that he needs to be nerfed. Irelia definitely needs to be nerfed. That 5% or 5 movement speed is a joke. Now, they are addressing that some on this patch, but she's the very similar story to Aatrox, right? High mobility, very difficult to kill, very high damage output. So it's like, how do you beat her when she has 2 items, or even 1 item, when she gets that Trinity Force? It's very difficult. Like, you have to significantly outplay her, or the person has to be very bad on her. So those two are definitely public enemy number 1 and number 2. These need significant nerfs. LeBlanc is still on the strong side. Now, she doesn't have all 3 of those. If you do get a hold of her, you can kill her, so she just has high mobility and really high damage. But the problem is, like, her mobility is so far over the top. I think what they really need to do is just make it to where she can't mimic her W. I think that's it. She can have really high damage, but she can't have 2 jumps every time it's off cooldown. I think that's just too much mobility, and it does too much damage. I don't mind the W doing a lot of damage, but I just think that being able to engage on somebody and potentially one-shot them from like 2,000 units away and instantly like teleport back to where you were 2,000 units ago off of double jumping and like chaining somebody is too much. Like, there's too much possibility you one-shot with limited counterplay to it, unless someone CCs you like really quickly, which is unreasonable to ask in most solo queue brackets. So I think she definitely needs a little bit of a nerf. I don't think she's as bad as the previous 2, because once again, if you do get a hold of her, you can kill her. Champions like Kassadin are pretty good into her, and he's pretty popular and pretty strong right now. So, you know, she's kind of more of an annoyance thing than an overall, like, this thing's really overpowered. But I still think she's a bit on the strong side. Akali's another one that's hard to assess. If she gets really far ahead, it's hard to deal with her. I think she is a case of probably more annoyance than actual power. Because there are a lot of really bad Akalis out there, but she could probably use an adjustment in how she functions. Kha'Zix, I think, is very overpowered right now. Now, some of that could be because of Dark Harvest, but he can also use Electrocute. He just does too much damage. The invisibility is extremely frustrating to go against. He's very good at taking these new objectives. He's very good at dueling people in the jungle. I just think he's a little bit over the top. Yeah, we can look at him here in a little bit. I mean, basically, the deal is, I'll look at him right now because they didn't change him on this patch. Spoiler. But I think, once again, win rates aren't everything, but I'm pretty sure he's risen quite a lot. Popping up to like 53% win rate, which, you know, like Udyr has a 55%, but he's not as scary as some of these other ones. But yeah, Kha'Zix is very popular right now. He's the 2nd most picked champion. And to be honest with you, like I said, I'm not entirely sure why he has become super powerful again. I think a lot of it has to do with Dark Harvest. I think a lot of it is he can just duel a lot of these other fighters early. He takes Scuttles quickly, he takes Dragons quickly, Gromps, buffs. And he has really sort of creative gank paths because he's got that jump. He's got the resets. I think they didn't they buff his Q fairly recently? Yeah, 819. They gave Unseen Threat. So that wasn't that long ago, an extra 20% AD. Get 90% slow off of that. I think the big one here is just this extra Unseen Threat. That's not even the isolation damage. That's just straight up like his passive when someone goes invisible. This is where they nerfed him a lot. earlier in the season, where they nerfed his invisibility. I think this right here has made him a bit stronger, and then, I don't know, I'll do a jungle tier list video where I'll probably talk about him a little more. But I think he's a little bit over the top, so I would nerf him a little bit. And then Lucian is by far and away, I think, the strongest AD carry right now. He's the most played. He does way too much damage early, and he scales really well. Has great itemization. It's partially, like, pretty defensive. Like, he does too much offense, too much defense, too much mobility. So he's kind of like the triple threat in the AD carry role. Because he can even get things like Ninja Tabby. He can get a relatively defensive item like Black Cleaver with extra 400 health on it. And he can still just completely annihilate people early on. And he can get the lifesteal. He has a ton of mobility off of Blade of the Ruined King in his dashes. So he's kind of the triple threat from the AD carry role right now. I haven't looked at his pick and ban rates, but yeah, I mean, it's picked in 31% of games, and it still has a 53% win rate. That means that, like, everyone that's getting autofilled is playing Lucian, and they're still winning all the time. So, anyways, I think he definitely needs some stuff. Dark Harvest, too strong. We'll talk about that in a second when we go through the patch notes, but they are addressing that one. I think they have a pretty good change going there. Smite mid lane is starting to show up again, most notably with Aatrox, but there are other Smite mid laners that can work too. I think Karthus is a decent candidate for it. You could see this pop into professional play again, like really like formal funneling comps, not just take Smite, but like run Xayah Rakan middle or something like that with Smite. So I think that's really bad PR. I don't think it's actually that powerful in solo queue most of the time. You're just robbing resources from your jungler. And the power of junglers is actually really important right now. But I think it's bad from a public relations perspective, the PR. It feels bad when you're playing solo queue, you have no idea who this guy is. Like, that's your mid laner that takes Smite, but he takes your Raptors if you're the jungler. And, yeah, that's just going to piss people off a lot. Or you constantly take their Wolves or Raptors. Your jungler's going to be underfarmed. And if your jungler's behind, that means they're going to have a harder time taking objectives. They're going to have a harder time fighting other junglers. So it's like, yeah, in pro play, where you have a very specific comp, where you pick a utility jungler, or just someone who doesn't need a lot of farm, or you just straight run a funnel comp where you have a support, you know, in the middle with you, instead of like a formal jungler, then that can work. But I think in solo queue, like, the main reason is it just pisses off all the junglers. Like, that's a huge deal with the mid laner taking their farm. For not that much of an advantage. Most mid laners don't even get that much of an advantage. They miss CS because they don't manage the wave properly, so they'll miss CS in the lane when they go to take the jungle stuff. They just don't, even if they do get a level up and get a small lead, they don't abuse it that much, and the jungler falls behind. So I think it's pretty toxic from, like, people just aren't going to like it, even though I think this is just more perception rather than it actually being powerful in solo queue. So I think one thing they could do, and I've said this in the past, something like this where if you have more minion kills than you do monster kills, then you get half of the golden experience for monsters. Or just make it to where, like, just something like that, where you can't farm both at the same time. Or, like, if you have that item, if you have the Smite item, then you only get, like, half experience from lane minions or something. Because junglers shouldn't be hanging out in the lane getting experience anyways. So, I don't know. I feel like there just needs to be a little bit more done to prevent that. I mean, they're working on it. They know it's a problem, so I think they'll probably have a fix for it. And the big issue is no presence of tanks. So I think they should buff Cinderhulk, bring back Tracker's Knife, and, like, lower the top-end tank items by, like, 200G. I mean, just let me show you what I'm talking about real quick. Like, the efficiency of tank items is an absolute joke right now compared to offensive items. Especially when you consider that there are so many anti-tank things in the game right now. You've got Blade of the Ruined King. You have a lot of the newer reworked champions do true damage, or maximum % health damage, or both. So you think about something like Camille has a lot of true damage in her kit. Fiora has a lot of true damage in her kit. Irelia has true damage. Aatrox has % health damage. Urgot has that true damage execute based on % health. So there's just so many anti-tank tools out there. Conqueror on anybody. Darius is very popular. True damage. So just with the presence of Conqueror, all of these different percentage health things, true damage, all around the place. There's a lot of mobilities. You can kite and escape tanks now more than ever. I think it's okay to put some power back into their kits. And I would start with their items, because I think their items were just nerfed into the dirt. I would just drop the cost by 200 on all of them. They're just way too expensive. You look at something like Dead Man's Plate. This is an 80% efficient item. You're paying 20% just for this passive. You know, it's 3,000 gold. Yeah, you can get up to the 60 flat movement speed before you attack somebody, but like in combat, you're basically paying 700 gold for this movement speed and like a little bit of like extra damage on your first hit. Like, that's terrible. If you look at something like Sunfire Cape, 80% efficiency. Even something like Randuin's, I haven't looked at this, 78% efficiency. Like, that's so dumb. So tanks are just like actively losing a ton of gold by just buying their items. So it just feels like it shouldn't be. The defensive item, I think, should always be cheaper than the offensive item, because the offensive item is going to allow you to snowball, is going to allow you to get ahead, whereas the defensive item, you're just reacting to what they're doing, and it's not going to allow you to assert as much of an advantage in as many different types of situations. Versus if we look at the efficiency of some of these other items out here, Blatherin King's not a good one, because that has an extremely powerful active. But if we just look at and even something like Stormrazor, like, look at this. Extremely powerful passive. Right? Gives you a free crit. That's like 100% crit rate off of this. It's still 106% efficient. It's 106% efficient, even with two extremely powerful passives. So with the Storm's Edge, I don't know how they're calculating. Oh, the movement speed. So it's not even calculating the free crit that you get. That's just the movement speed that you gain for that short time. Gives you extra efficiency. But it's just insanely powerful. You know, even if we look at something like simple like Runin's Hurricane. I haven't looked at these, but it's probably going to be at least like 88% efficient. And that has a crazy powerful passive too. It basically gives you like 2 extra attacks. It's almost like you crit on every hit. You're getting, you know, even in a team fight, you're getting 80% extra AD just off of the bolts. That's not even including interactions with Blatherin King, or if you actually have crit and those bolts crit and all that stuff. That's just straight up, if you're just normally attacking, you're getting 80% extra AD. So that's like you're doing 1.8 AD damage. That's almost like you have 100% crit if there's 3 people in a team fight and you're attacking them. So that's like really, really efficient. That's probably closer to like, I don't know, 140% efficiency. So it's just like all of the offensive items are just way more efficient than the defensive items. And so even if a tank is trying to build defensive stuff, they're just going to get out damaged by all of this other stuff. So I think just cut them a break. Just lower the cost on their items by like 200 gold instead of like, you know, 2,900 for big ticket items. Make it 2,700. Just so they can start to get a couple of those items. Bring in Tracker's Knife. Bring back some of the utility champions like Ivern, like Nunu. You're giving up a lot of fighting power to have Tracker's Knife. If you have Tracker's Knife, you get your wards, yeah. But then also, you're just going to lose one-on-one fights. You know, if you're a Tracker's Knife Ivern and Kha'Zix jumps over a wall on you and he has the Skirmisher Saber, like, you lose. So I think that, especially in solo queue, Tracker's Knife gets punished a lot. Now, yes, Vision is very powerful. I don't know. I mean, people can make the argument also that, well, that's too good for pro play. It gives too much vision. It's like, does it though? Does it, considering like the nerfs to Zombie Ward, the nerfs to all kinds of other like vision type of things? I think it rewards creative pathing. I think that it helps people make more plays. I think it allows utility junglers to be able to do something. Because right now it's like, if you can't fight, there's no reason in playing in the jungle. If you're a utility champion, because everybody has to get something like Skirmisher Saber, and like Warrior Enchant and things like that. So I don't know. I think Trackers was good, but anyways, and then just buff Cinderhulk. Just allow that to be back in the game. You've already nerfed Warmogs a lot. I think the thing that was really toxic was when people were going Cinderhulk plus Warmogs first and second item and reaching that the Warmogs threshold. That's pretty toxic. To just constantly be full health, just have 100% uptime on ganking and farming and things like that with someone like Sejuani. I think that's a reasonable concern. But I think that Cinderhulk itself was punished too hard for that. I think that people should be able, a tank should be able to have an item that makes them tankier, that helps them clear the jungle a little bit faster. So, they need to do something to bring tanks back into the game, though. I know everyone cries about tanks, but the problem is when tanks aren't in the game, then assassins are too powerful because there's very little counterplay, because assassins can one-shot anyone in the game if there's no tank. And so they're just good to get, they just counter everything. Right now, it's just basically whoever gets the first hit on the other person wins. Most of the time. Because everyone's a squishy, either assassin or a squishy non-assassin. So tanks help keep assassins in line. And I think if there's like one tank on a team, maybe even two, I think that assassins can still be good. They just have to actually pick their targets correctly. You know, they have to actually pay attention to front lines and back lines and team fights. They can't just hit whoever's close, you know. So that's part of the skill of assassin, is being able to find good opportunities to get to priority targets. If everyone's a priority target, you know, that takes away a lot of the finesse and a lot of the skill that should be required to play an assassin. Assassins should be high mobility, high risk, high reward champions. And right now, they're just high reward, low risk champions. Is what it feels like. It would also make AD carries good again if there were tanks. AD carries exist to do high sustained damage. You don't need to do high sustained damage if everyone dies in 2 hits. There's just no point. So that's the biggest issue with AD carries that's been going on, and people forget about that. They think, oh, they changed the crit items, or oh, they like, you know, put mages in the bot lane and stuff like that, and that's why AD carries are bad. No, the reason AD carries have been bad is because they nerfed tanks out of the meta. So there's no reason to play an AD carry most of the time. I mean, a lot of the modern champions are already good at taking objectives. You have someone like Kha'Zix, you have someone like Karthus. They can take dragons and barons really quickly, so you don't need AD carries for that. You know, you need to siege towers in a sense, but there are lots of champions that can do very well into towers also. Or you can just catch people out just for, I mean, you don't even have to siege anymore. You just basically wait till Baron's up, and you just force a fight around Baron. You just get vision around Baron, and you either pick someone off or you force a 5v5 team fight. And then if you have Baron, you don't need like an AD carry to siege the tower, because the minions just take the towers for free anyways. And so there's just like no reason for AD carry to exist right now, because there's no tanks. You can take objectives with other types of champions. And just people don't sit around and ARAM towers anymore, because they just sit around and ARAM Baron instead, and it forces fights, so you don't have to have that range to take out towers. All you have to have is a really good, you know, Thresh Hook or Pike Hook or Recon Initiation or something like that. Getting up, so I gotta go grab her in a second, so I don't want to take too long on this. But I think that's the biggest thing, is they need to find a way to bring tanks back in, because that will bring the league back into balance, right? That will bring down assassins a little bit, which will also help AD carries. And that will bring up AD carries a little bit, because there will be a reason for them to exist. If Kha'Zix can't one-shot that Sejuani, or LeBlanc can't one-shot the Ornn, you just might actually need that Vayne, who has 3 items to kill that champion. I know that sounds crazy, that you might actually, it might take longer than 3 seconds to kill somebody. But I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And the final thing that I'll note is I think that Ulti Hunter and Presence of Mind are both very strong right now in tandem, particularly on champions like Karthus, but I don't think it's too over the top. I think it's a cool interaction. Okay, so those are my thoughts kind of on the meta, and now let's talk about the patch notes really quickly. The patch notes, spoiler alert, are not really going to address most of this, but that's why I wanted to add that in there, because I don't think there's going to be too much that's going to change in the meta in this patch notes, but we'll go through it here anyways. Okay, so Aatrox, they're trying to stop him from, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they're trying to stop him from doing this jungle stuff. I don't think it's going to work. Who cares? Okay, he does a little bit less damage against Raptors. Maybe that matters at the very top end. Maybe it takes him an extra, like, couple of seconds to clear. I mean, if he can't do it efficiently in, like, one round of his Qs, if he has to wait on the full cooldown, then that will actually matter level 1 from taking Smite. So maybe that helps. But there are other champions that can take Smite and Raptors also. Anyways, Akali, I don't think this is going to matter at all. It's like, yeah, the Shroud duration is lower by 1 second, but a lot of times, I don't know. I just don't think it's going to matter. The cooldown isn't changed. They were thinking about raising the cooldown on it. I think that would have been helpful. But she can still do a lot of her shenanigans. Towers still don't see her. It's still hard to interact with her. It's still going to give her pretty good escapes. And she still has her really high damage. So I don't think it's going to change that much. Maybe a little bit. But once again, I mean, Akali is very good, but I think just Towers should see her in the Shroud. I don't know why the hell not. Like, they can see everything else. But anyways, it's fine. I don't think it's going to change. But she does have a 46% win rate, so, you know, there are a lot of bad Akali's out there. Camille lowering the attack speed in the jungle by 0.2. I don't know how much this actually matters. On some champions, it matters a lot. On other champions, not so much. It depends on how... I'm not... Like, this would be, like, very top-end jungle type of stuff. Because I didn't think the 3 AD on Graves mattered either, but people just aren't picking Graves anymore. I'm not sure. I think he's still pretty good. But I think she'll still be strong. Galio. This is a lot of changes to Galio. I don't get it. I mean, Galio's bad, I think, right now. I mean, I don't know his win rate. And once again, I don't think win rate is, like, always necessarily indicative of... overall power, although it's certainly one factor among many that you would want to consider. He's about a 50% win rate. I mean, he's just bad. Like, tanks are bad right now. I mean, Freak basically did the math on this in his video, and he said that this is ultimately more damage, or this is good for people who build mostly tank Galio. It's bad for AP Galio. So they're nerfing AP Galio for some reason. I don't know. It's not going to matter. He's still going to be bad. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, this is actually one of the biggest changes, I think. 50% reduced damage to non-champions, so he can't wave clear as fast. So this might be able to wave clear a little bit more. Although, I'm not sure, because now it's based on max percent health rather than flat damage. So this would probably do more to, like, Baron or Dragon. But I don't know about normal minions, like, how much that's going to matter. So, we'll see, but it's not going to give him a ton of extra wave clear. I guess it'll give him some, but now he can't use this to wave clear also. It is faster. I'll have to see how this feels. And they just nerfed his ult for some reason. Like, is that really necessary? Is this really that much of a buff? Doesn't feel like it's that much of a buff to me. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see what I just don't think it's gonna matter. He's just gonna get murdered in the current meta. I mean, just Irelia, Aatrox, a lot of champions are just gonna blow him up. I think. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like he's just still not gonna be that great because the itemization is not gonna be super amazing on him. Dinger got a couple of buffs. Probably not gonna overall impact his position in the meta. It's like, you can be okay with Dinger, but I don't think he's a great champion for most people. If you one-trick him, you could maybe be affected, but I don't think this is really going to change that much. It's a nice little buff to him. Alawi, probably not going to matter that much. Test of Spirit is interesting. I'm not sure how much she maxes this. I think this is her second max. It might be her first. But this will allow her to rip more spirits early for the to get those Klepto procs top lane, which is really nice. Now, I think in theory, if they were to nerf champions like Irelia and Aatrox enough, she might be able to bully them out early to serve as, like, you know, an early game bully, anti-melee champion type of thing. So I think that's interesting, but I don't think this is necessarily going to be enough. Her ult's going to be up a little bit more in the really late game, which is nice, but she's okay. I don't think she's, like, terrible right now, but I don't think she's top tier either. I mean, she's probably, like, tier 3 or something. I haven't done a top tier list in a while, but you can win with her, but there are probably better options. Irelia, they are... I don't know, like, not getting that stack, how much that's going to matter. Giving 4 extra seconds on Defiant Dance is okay, but the issue is, like, in team fights, you're only casting this once anyways. You know, if something's over 12 seconds, you're only casting it once. Usually if something's over, like, 5 seconds, you're only casting it once in fights these days. That might be a little extreme, but... either way, she's only doing this once, so the cooldown's not going to matter. It will, in theory, in lane, if you're trying to trade with this, every possible moment your W is up, you try to go in for a trade. So, like, really top-end play, like challenger play. Maybe this will hurt her laning phase a little bit more, but for most people who just kind of save this as an emergency button, the W, I don't think it's going to matter, the cooldown. Now, the damage reduction from 50 to 40 is okay, but you can, you still can't get CC'd out of it. I think she's still going to be too strong. At least they're, like, trying to dial her back a little bit. I would remove some of the true damage out of her kit. But Jax, late game, they're taking down his damage by a little bit. I'll have to look and see. He has excessive damage. He overkills people late game, so I don't think it's going to matter that much. I don't feel like Jax is overwhelmingly powerful right now. He's okay, but he does take time to fire up. There's pretty good counterplay to him. Okay. I mean, maybe they need to nerf him. He did have a pretty high win rate, I think, in the jungle, but I feel like there are other champions that are a bigger problem than Jax as far as balance goes, but he does have a 54% win rate, so. Okay, sure. It's fine. LeBlanc, they increased the cooldown on this. Now, this seems like it would be really meaningful, but I'm pretty sure a lot of LeBlancs max this first now. And so really this isn't as meaningful as it seems. So like by level 5, if you max this first, it's 2 extra seconds on it. And by level 9, it's no change. So this is a, like, an okay sort of recognition that she's overpowered, a little tap on her, but I still think she's going to be on the strong side. But we'll see. Now Victor's getting a pretty hard nerf, which Victor's okay, like he's good, but Aatrox and Irelia are way more impressive than Victor is, I think. I don't know. Maybe in Challenger, like, it's a different kind of story. What's Victor's win rate? %. I mean, I don't know. Whatever. They nerfed him last patch too, I think. So they're definitely taking side of Victor. So longer cooldown on his Q at all levels is meaningful because this is something that you spam all the time. And you're knocking off 30 damage off the base, which is quite a lot. But they are adding, they're lowering the cooldown on his Death Ray, and they're giving more ability power ratio to it. So, you know, they're just trying to get people to build AP Victor more instead of going the Iceborne Gauntlet Victor. We'll see how that plays out. That's fine. Okay, Death's Dance, 15% of all damage dealt. So this could make it more appealing to certain champions that have, like, magic damage in their kit and physical damage. They have, like, double ratios. I mean, obviously something like Kaisa, maybe. Katarina? Would Kat want something like this? I don't think her AD ratios are that big. I mean, I know she likes Gunblade, but... let me see. Like, I say Katarina because she notoriously has AD ratios on her abilities that do AP damage. So, like, right here, 100 bonus AD applies to her daggers, which is the same as the AP. And then she notoriously has AD ratios here, so like her Shunpo, which is not a huge part of her kit. I'm not a cat expert. She actually has higher scaling, AD scaling on her ult than AP. She has higher AD scaling on her Shunpo. Her daggers only do AP. They have no AD ratio. So, it would be weird to get that on her, but like, she's the one person that I'm thinking, like, maybe that could kind of make sense because that could help keep you alive. That would give you double life steal or double, like, steal off of your gunblade. Plus Death Stance. You do get cooldown reduction on it. Let's see if the efficiency is 115%. The problem is a lot of this stuff building up to it probably sucks, and she doesn't auto attack that much. I don't know. I mean, there might be some obscure champions, you know, like that. Obviously, someone like Draven would like this, but he doesn't have, like, any magic damage. So I'm sure someone will be able to find some champion, potentially, that where it's going to matter a lot that they, you know, gain that extra lifesteal off of AD. I mean, maybe a Kali? She has an AD ratio here, AD ratio here. That's all AD on her Shuriken flip. And that's actually... AP is more beneficial there. Maybe a Kali. I don't know. Some of these hybrid champions, like a Kali or Katarina. I don't know. I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, the bottom line is I don't think it's going to matter. So I'll just throw that out there. Maybe a Kali. Maybe Katarina. I don't know. I know a Kali gets Gunblade. The problem is most of them like Hourglass 2. Akali and Katarina, and like magic penetration's pretty good on them. So, I don't know. Herald, okay, if you're bad and you accidentally misclick Herald, you have a little bit more room there. Poacher's Dirk, they're removing it because they say it's a noob trap. I think that's pretty weak reasoning, because like, why is Ohnrecker still in the game if that's the case? I don't know. But, I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, nobody gets this item anyways, most of the time. So, I know there will be people outraged, like, oh my god, I love Poacher's Dirk. You know, they'll hit up the forums and stuff. But, realistically, it's not going to matter for the meta. It's pretty poor reasoning. It just seems kind of random. But, overall, I just don't think it matters. And finally, we get to the thing that actually matters on this patch, is Dark Harvest. So... they're lowering the base damage from 40 to 20, which is very, very significant early on in the game. That is a huge deal. And it no longer procs off of what they're calling procs. So basically, you have to apply a new source of damage when someone is below 50%, or if you get the reset, you have to apply a new source of damage in order to get the Dark Harvest. So that means that Leandry burns, Scorch burns, I believe things like Teemo Poison, Ignite, like Malzahar Malefic Visions. I think... see, I just don't know how they're defining procs here. But I think what it means is you have to apply a new source of damage from a new spell or a new auto attack in order to trigger it. But I don't know all the instances of this. It says that Luden's Echo is an exception for some reason, because that's designed to act like a separate ability. So I don't know how every single ability and item is coded in the game to act like a separate ability or not. But from what I understand, a lot of the damage over time stuff is no longer going to work. I don't think brand passive. Now, a Zyra plant, I'm not sure, because I think that each auto attack is coded as a separate source of damage on her plants. So I don't know all of the interactions with this. But my instinct is that this will bring this much more into balance. So it's going to be a scaling item now. It's going to be a lot weaker than Electrocute in most cases. If we look at, I thought I had the runes. Yeah, I've got them here for you, the scaling. So, you know, Dark Harvest compared to Electrocute. Electrocute has more bonus AD ratio. It's got 15% more bonus AD. It has 10% more AP. And it starts at 30 damage, goes to 180. Versus this starts at 20, only goes to 60. And this has a 45% cooldown early on. This has a 25-second cooldown early on. So you're going to be triggering this a lot more. And as far as just base number scaling, if we just look at like level 9 or whatever, you'd have 101 damage off of Electrocute. And it would be like a 22-second cooldown versus 39 damage here. So, you know, if we round that off to 40, just for a nice easy number, that means you'd have to have 12 Dark Harvest stacks by the time you're level 9 to match an Electrocute proc in terms of damage. Not including the fact that Electrocute is going to have higher ratios. So you're going to get more bang for your buck out of your AP and your AD with that. So that's just a nice benchmark to think of. It's like, okay, by level 9, can you have 12 Dark Harvest stacks? If the answer is no, and you're a champion that can hit people 3 times pretty quickly, then you should be picking Electrocute. So I think that a lot of champions are going to go back to doing Electrocute. I think Electrocute will probably be better on like Zyra. But there are some champions that can't hit people 3 times that easily that would not proc Electrocute very well. I don't know all of them offhand. I mean, obviously something like Karthus hitting people from across the map is still going to probably want Dark Harvest. Another benefit of Dark Harvest, obviously, is if you get resets. So champions who can apply resets, that obviously changes the equation. Because if you can get 2 procs of Dark Harvest off in a fight, then that changes a lot, right? So now it's no longer doing 40 damage, it's doing 80 damage base. And your stacks are effectively doubling, right? So if you only have 6 stacks of Dark Harvest, you know, if you only trigger that once in a fight at level 9 or whatever, if you have about 40 damage, that would normally be 70 damage, right? So you'd have the 60 from the procs and then 40 base to be 70 damage. That looks like it's worse than Electrocute. But if you get a reset in a fight, and then you apply it to somebody else, all of a sudden that's 140 damage. And instead of just being a 0.25 bonus AD ratio, it's a 0.5 bonus AD ratio because you're triggering it twice. So I think on champions where you can get resets naturally, so maybe something like a Katarina who can get resets, maybe still Brand who can get resets. People who can consistently apply new sources of damage, I think will still want Dark Harvest. So let me just look and see who would still like Dark Harvest. Maybe Ari. She doesn't get resets, but she can use her ult a lot to kind of have mobility to zip around. I guess that's possible. But champions who just have like 1 rotation and somebody's dead, like Annie, would probably prefer Electrocute. Someone like Fizz would prefer Electrocute. Karthus is someone who would probably like Dark Harvest. So I think it'll be decent. Cat would probably like Dark Harvest. LeBlanc is likely to go back to Electrocute. So if your goal is to kill somebody in 1 rotation, you're just kind of out of gas after that. If you can't like transition and start killing other people really quickly, then you probably want to go back to Electrocute. If you're someone who can consistently get resets and continually sort of fight people, maybe Pike would still like something like Dark Harvest. Although he executes, so yeah, I don't even know about it on Pike. I think you would still go Aftershock on Pike. Yeah, I think it's a lot worse. Like, there are some champions that are going to want it, but I think there's definitely a lot of other champions that'll probably just switch back over to Electrocute. So I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. It's going to hurt things like Zyra, things like Brand during the laning phase. It's going to take some bite out of champions like maybe like Kha'Zix out of the jungle and some of these fighters, although once again, they can still go to Electrocute and be pretty strong. So we'll see. I think the ultimate winners here are going to be enchanters. So things like Nami, things like Rakan, things like Sona are going to be a lot stronger the laning phase because they're not going to be constantly taking these hits from Dark Harvest. You know, from like Jhin Lux with both having Dark Harvest, or Zyra, you know, Jhin with Dark Harvest, or Zyra Misfortune with Dark Harvest. Like, those kinds of comps will still be okay, but they won't be as strong as they were. Okay. 1 extra second on the Raptors and the Wolves spawn. Maybe that's our great solution to smite mid laners is to add 1 extra second on the spawn. I don't know. It doesn't seem significant to me, but maybe it is. Okay. And then they're trying out, like, the tiers, divisions. This is not going to matter for most people, other than the fact that there is iron now that could be very relevant for people kind of at the lower end, but you'd have to get demoted into it. And then there's only 4 ranks instead of 5. So that's beneficial. So if you're, like, Silver 5, you are now Silver 4. Congrats. Bug fixes. One really important one here is Alistar. Don't worry about what this was. This was actually a really powerful bug if you did it correctly on Alistar, to where you'd get an extra like half a second on his combo. But they fixed it, so it doesn't matter now. Okay, so real quickly with the time we have left, let's just talk about these proposed AD carry changes. I've had people ask about that. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because we don't have exact details, but I pretty much gave you my thoughts on AD carry and what the problem is, and the biggest problem is that tanks aren't viable right now. That's the problem with AD carries, is that they just don't have a purpose. You know, that they are built to do heavy sustained damage, to overcome champions that can't be killed through burst, either through burst mages or assassins or whatever. So they're built to beat Sejuani. You know, AD carries should be beating Sejuani. They should beat Ornn. You know, they should beat Maokai. Those types of champs, right? AD carries are not designed to beat Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix is designed to beat them. Like, champions that throw out really high burst usually beat AD carries. So, that's the biggest thing. They don't mention that here. And I worry that that's a major oversight, that they're trying to balance it around, like, just making AD carries good against assassins and things like that. And I think that's going to lead to AD carries being OP if they try to do that. I like the paper, rock, scissors. I don't know what's wrong with that, with the Trinity there, where it's like tanks beat assassins, assassins beat AD carries beat tanks. With obviously shades of gray and different sort of mixtures in there. But I think that's a good, like, triangle to start with. But anyways, they're like, oh, we captured all this data here. It's like, guys, this has been really obvious for a long time. They're like, we saw on social media, people were saying that AD carries are weak. It's like, nobody has said AD carries are strong. For like the last 6 months, everyone's been crying about AD carries ever since June, when y'all did that change. And remember, the change was not just the crit changes, that's what everyone noticed, but it was also tanks fell out of the meta. People forget that. And like patch 8.9 or 8.8, whatever it was, they just butchered all of the tanks. So there just were no more tanks in solo queue that often. So anyways, they're like, wow, we noticed that people are saying that they're weak. It's like, we did a survey, and it turns out that people in-game actually think that AD carries are weak. It's like, well, no crap. Like, it's obvious. Pro players say it. Solo queue players say it. Everyone says it, okay? Now, there are some AD carries that are still strong. I think some of those accusations are overblown. I think that Lucian is still very good. I think that, like, Jhin is still really good. I think that Misfortune is pretty good right now. But outside of that, yes, everyone else is bad. For the most part, Draven is still good. So you've got Jhin, or you have Lucian at the top, and then I think a good Draven, and then Jhin and Misfortune. So you do have 4 champions that are still pretty strong in the AD carry role, but your Tristanas, your Caitlyn's, your Vaynes, now your Kaisas, all of those are going to be on the weak side, I believe. Twitch is still one that's like always kind of hovering like into being pretty strong though, just for different reasons. I talk about him all the time at AD carry tier list. But okay, so they have acknowledged that AD carries are pretty weak, potentially. So they're talking about sort of their methodology. It is cool they're trying to be transparent with their methodology. It's like, wow, it turns out that a lot of divers and assassins have become very popular. So that's bad for AD carries. It's like, duh. Of course it is. Bring back tanks. I'm not saying I love tanks. I probably won't even play tanks, honestly. But tanks, like, being in the meta are just good for the ecosystem. It makes AD carries better. It nerfs mages. It makes enchanters better. There's so many people on my channel that love to play Soraka or love to play Janna. And I always have to say, it's like, well, those champions are like, okay, but they'd be way better if tanks were around. Because it doesn't matter if you have Soraka healing if your AD carry dies in one rotation from a Kha'Zix, or if you're trying to go out and ward and you just get one-shotted by insert X jungler who jumps over a wall. So it's just better for the ecosystem. So many more, you're just not going to have a lot of champion diversity unless you bring tanks back. Not just for the tanks, but for a lot of other classes as well. Coupled with lower play on tanks and defensive supports in general. Yeah, because you nerf Tahm Kench and Braum into the dirt. Tahm Kench especially, but Braum is still, like, viable in high-level play, but... yeah. Yes, you need lower play rates on tanks because they're bad right now. Buff them. Okay, so they're onto it a little bit. Yes, it's like, okay, we've figured out that playing a marksman doesn't feel good when tanks are bad, there aren't as many defensive supports, and assassins are really strong. So they came to this revelation. We believe that some marksmen are currently strong. Lucian, Ezreal, Misfortune, Jhin. Well, they got 3 of them right. Ezreal is a complete pile of garbage right now. After they nerfed his wave clear on his ult, he feels really bad. He does almost no damage. Like, there could be some good Ezreals out there, but by and large, 90% of the Ezreals you're going to have on your team in solo queue are going to be really bad. It's usually auto-filled people that are trying to be safe. I don't know. I like playing Ezreal. He's fun, but I got filled as AD carry last week, and I tried him out on this patch after those changes. He just feels really awful. It's like, yeah, you can get away with not dying, but you're never going to kill anybody. Like, I couldn't even kill the minions in this game. Like, the minions got a lot of extra health, and you lost your wave clear off of your R now, and they changed it to where you don't get attack speed anymore off your passive. I think, right? Didn't they take that away? Or was it off of your W? They nerfed his passive, right? And they, like, took some of the attack speed off of it. It just feels like you don't attack as fast as you used to. And that certainly, you can feel that for sure. 10% bonus attack speed, stacking up to 5 times. Or am I just crazy? I gotta look now and see. Did they nerf his passive? Yeah, this is where they did that change, which... they're trying to turn him into a combo mage, which feels kind of bad. Maybe they did. Maybe I'm just crazy. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Ezreal's not good right now. But either way, they figured out there are a couple of good AD carries. I agree with the other 3. Yeah, crit marksmen are bad. We believe that itemization, crit primarily, needs work. Just revert it. Like, here's the thing about AD carries. Here's how AD carries should work, I think, in terms of itemization and power spikes. It should be on single item, you are weaker than mages, you are weaker than assassins. Okay, so whatever your first item is going to be weaker than the first item on other champs. Okay, so if you're rushing, I don't know, just thinking of like, if you're rushing BF Sword into Zeal, right, into your first item, you know, Static Shiv or Rapid Fire Cannon, just thinking of like 2017 AD carries, that should be weaker than a, you know, a mage that completes their Ludens, alright? So if you have your Static Shiv, they have Ludens, they should be able to beat you in a fight, because they're going to be able to blow you up fast. Okay, so that's it. That's where burst mages should be strongest, is off of first item. They get a head start on everybody else, okay? But you can still kind of do stuff as AD carry off of 1 item, but you should feel weak. At 2 items, I think that you should be about even. So once the mage gets their second item, you should be able to relatively hang with them. So when they get their Ludens plus their Morellonomicon or whatever, you're an AD carry, and traditionally you get your, you know, Static Shiv or your Rapid Fire Cannon, then you complete your Infinity Edge second, you should actually be able to do some damage. So you're not going to have as much burst damage as, you know, whatever it is out of mid lane, the Orianna or something, but if you're able to outplay her, if she misses one of her, you know, abilities or something like that, you should be able to kill her relatively quickly, right? So you should have some power. By the third item, AD carry should be one of the strongest things in the game. That's what I think. If the game goes on long enough to where you get 3 items, they should be strong. You know, they should have high sustained damage, and they should have, like, reasonable upfront damage at that point. And then, you know, as you go on later into 4th and 5th items, they would keep scaling indefinitely. With some exceptions, right? Mages like Ryze, Cassiopeia, Azir should be able to keep up with AD carries, and some AD carries should fall off. You know, Miss Fortune's going to fall off a little bit. Jin's probably going to fall off a little bit. You know, all of those exceptions aside, I think that's how the template should look. 1 item weaker, 2 items even, 3 items stronger. And I think that makes sense from a risk-reward perspective. Then you can think, okay, I'm going to be weaker, you know, until about 20 to 25 minutes. And then I'm going to, you know, complete my 3rd item. I'm going to be, like, even somewhere between 25. So I'm going to be weaker for the first 15. I'm going to be about even between, like, maybe 15 and 25. And then I'm going to be one of the strongest things on the map from 25 plus. I should be able to go into God mode if I can survive and play okay at that point. Like, not necessarily 1v9. If I get jumped on by an assassin, I'm still dead. But I should have a reasonable chance of putting up a good fight in a lot of situations. And I think that's how the old crit itemization worked. You know, you got your static shiv or your rapid fire or whatever first. You got your BF sword. You completed Infinity Edge. You felt strong on 2 items. You're like, okay, I'm feeling good. And then you got your 3rd item, and you're like, bang, I'm really, you know, just taking everyone to the rack. They're just destroying everybody. I have a lot of crit. We've got a lot of extra stuff that works well with this. It feels good. Then I can get, like, a defensive item as my 4th item, right? And get a GA or a Quicksilver Sash or something like that. And it feels all good. So I don't know what was wrong with that or why, you know. A lot of it was Ardent Censor was very strong, and Enchanters were strong, and they nerfed Ardent Censor, they nerfed Enchanters, and they nerfed crit itemization. So, like, I think that crit champions in the first 8 patches before they did the crit rework in 2018 were fine. I thought they were strong. Tanks were strong. I thought that was fine, but anyways, okay, so they want to change crit around a little bit. Feels bad, true. Needs work. Storm Razor sucks. I agree. Because why? It's a burst item. That's not a crit item. Like, yeah, it scales with crit. Not really. Like, you just get it because you do a lot of damage early, and you have to get it. Like, its multiplier is relatively weak. But you just have to have it just so you can do something off single item. Like, if you're not getting Blade of the Ruined King, or you're not getting Storm Razor, you just can't do anything. Like, in the current meta, because you're not going to be relevant ever. You're going to fall too far behind, so you just have to get it, and it feels bad. Like, you don't even have to revert all of the crit changes. Just change Infinity Edge back, where it amplifies crit. Why does it need to do true damage? I mean, their thought process was, we don't want, like, crit marksmen to be able to kill other squishies in, like, 1 or 2 shots. It's like, but they should be able to kill people in, like, maybe 3 shots if they have, like, 4 items. That should be a thing. Assassins can do it in, like, 1 auto attack. Like, I think an AD carry being able to do it in, like, 3 or 4 autos against another squishy champion should be reasonable. You know, they should be allowed to crit you for, like, 600 or 700 or something like that. So, I don't know. Okay, preseason's a time when willingness to play marksman has dropped historically. No, it hasn't. People always like to play AD carries. Well, it's because assassins are almost always overpowered, because assassins thrive on chaos, and preseason's usually chaotic. So it's not that people don't like playing AD carries, it's that assassins are so strong they snuff them out a lot of times in the preseason because it's chaos. Marksman predators getting played, given, flock to effective. Anti-carry, blah, blah, blah. Also reflects fewer players are choosing to queue as support because AD carries are bad, so it's harder to win as support when your AD carry's bad. So So they're trying to say that, well, this always happens where people don't play AD carries, or basically we have a lot of bad supports because people are playing off-meta terrible things. So AD carries aren't getting proper synergy from their supports. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of supports playing Lux right now, and there's a lot of supports playing Xerath right now. A lot of that's because of Dark Harvest, though, which they are changing, which is good. But, you know, basically they're trying to say AD carries aren't as bad as people think right here, pretty much. They're saying people haven't given them a shot. They've given them a shot for the last 6 months. I assure you, they are weak. Unless it's Lucian or Jhin or Misfortune, or like a good Draven player, not just any Draven, but a good Draven player, then they are weak. Okay. That makes sense where Marksman's core identity is late game hyper carry. No, their core identity is tank breaker and objective taker, and that, as we explained, is not a thing right now. Too skewed towards almost all offense and no defense. They should be that. Please don't go down the road of trying to make 80 carries into this thing that, like, is difficult to kill. They should be easy to kill if you get a hold of them. But they should also be able to kill other people. It's a finesse role. Like, if you're getting caught out, you should die. Get good. But if you actually outplay them, if you have really good positioning, you should be able to kill them. That's what, like, the glass cannon archer, you know, paradigm in gaming is supposed to be. I really hope they aren't trying to, like, turn them into some kind of defensive thing. Like, it's all about finesse and positioning with AD carry. It always has been. It always should be. Okay, so what are they doing here? So they want to buff up Corki. Yes, that's fine, because Corki's terrible. Like, he's really bad. If they want him to be a mage, just lower his mana cost and his cooldowns. Like, that's what he is. He's like a caster AD carry that does magic damage. Lower his cooldowns. Make them more effective. I don't know. Xayah, I don't think Xayah actually needs a buff, right? I think Xayah is still pretty good. I know her win rate's not amazing, but I'd be careful with that one. Ashe has a high win rate. I mean, she's got a 53% win rate if they're just looking at win rates, but yeah, some there would probably help. A little bit. Maybe a little bit more damage. Like, when she has her flurry going, maybe give it a little bit more damage on the flurry. Vayne, yeah, Vayne needs work. She sucks. Trist, yeah. And Jinx, yeah, to an extent. I'm glad they didn't put Caitlyn there, because I think Caitlyn's very dangerous. I think Caitlyn can be good, potentially. So I wouldn't give Caitlyn too much more. But yeah, these champs, okay, I agree with it. I wish they would look at Callista, but I think they're just kind of giving up on her. But yeah, that's a pretty good place to start. Giving them more starting magic resist. Okay, I guess. I think that's weird. I don't think that Xayah and Rakan are weak right now, so I hope they don't overbuff them too much. I wouldn't mind, obviously. I love Rakan, but I don't want him to be buffed to the point where he's picked or banned every game. Okay, looking at crit items. So they're basically saying that items feel bad. So it's like, regardless of balance. So it's like, they're balanced. Guys, crit is fine. It just feels bad. It's like, no, statistically, it is bad. It's not just that it feels bad. It's the numbers are bad. Because Infinity Edge is a dumb item right now. Because you're paying so much for, like, true damage, which doesn't matter against squishies, which is what everybody's playing. It's bad. So it's not like it feels bad. It's like, no, it is bad. Literally, when I'm auto-attacking this champion, they don't die. Like, that's not a feeling. That's like an actual, like, occurrence in the game with numbers that you could map out statistically. Like, it's not a feeling. It's not emotional. It is bad. Like, one of the reasons that Lucian's so strong is he doesn't build crit. Because he gets these defensive items that they're talking about here And he just has a crap ton of base damage, so he can afford to get something like a Black Cleaver because he's still going to just run you over with his passive and his Q. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of why he's really good. And then if you look at other champions, it's because they have high base damages built into their spells. So, like Jhin, really high base damages, you know, built into his grenade, built into his 4th shot crit that he has really high upfront damage, has really good CC that goes together well with other mages. So, like, you know, a mage hits somebody with a spell, Jhin hits him with a W, they chain that together. He has good synergy with other burst champions in the bot lane. Look at someone like Draven, very high upfront damage from his passive. Like, that's why these champions are good, is because they don't need the crit, because they do a lot of damage with no items. Misfortune, because of the crazy damage that comes out of her Q early on. So that's why, is because people are just playing champions that don't need items, and they do a lot of base damage based on their spells and just their specific, you know, interactions. Also be looking offense versus defense potential approaches, including making partial defensive buys decent choices. An early BT, that's not a partial buy, that's a 3,500 gold item. Unless they're planning on making Bloodthirster like a 2,600 gold item. Which would be interesting if they had a lifesteal item that was like a mini lifesteal item. You know, kind of in the range of like a Static Shiv or a Hurricane or something like that. That, like, obviously wouldn't scale that well, but could maybe get you through the laning phase. That'd be an interesting rework. That would make BT something unique and, you know, different from something like Death's Dance. Hex Drinker is a decent choice. You don't want to do that, though, because the problem is other roles will get this. If you make Hex Drinker too strong, you'll get, like, Irelia mid lane with Hex Drinker. Or really dangerous to do this cap, unless you make this, like, ranged only. I don't like going down this road of, like, more defensive stuff. Maybe base defense. They did nerf the, like, the base stats of, like, armor and health regen and stuff like that. I guess you could tinker with that some to help them in the early game. But I think a lot of it's just their itemization is terrible on crit champions right now. Who'd be better off if they lost a bit of late game power in exchange for better early and mid game power. So basically they're saying they want to have more people have more spells that do upfront damage instead of, like, scaling into late. Okay. I don't know, we'll see. I think it's okay. I think they're onto something. They do realize that marksmen feel bad. They are looking to change crit items. I wish they just revert it. I mean, I think it was fine. Just tinker with the numbers. If you need to make some of the Zeal items cost a bit more, just make Infinity Edge back to what it was. Or somewhere close. You know, if it needs to be 225% crit instead of 250%, or just whatever, like, you should be able to buy it as a second item and, like, not feel bad about it. Anyways, okay, that's it. We've gone on for about an hour. So I really wanted this to be shorter, but I did cover, like, theoretically what I think kind of needs to change in the meta, what I think about the 80 carry changes. So, you know, my overall verdict is, okay, they're on to sort of the right kind of stuff. I don't think it's going to be as good of a fix as, like, I was talking up there, but I think they're at least addressing it, so that's nice. So it looks okay. And as far as this patch goes, the patch itself, Dark Harvest is the big change, but I think a lot of the assassins and a lot of the things will still be good. They'll just run Electrocute instead. But there will be some champs that will definitely take a hit, like Karthus. Champions that were running Dark Harvest and don't have, like, other good runes. I mean, maybe, like, Teemo will take a bit of a hit. Jhin, Misfortune will take some hits off of the Dark Harvest, but they're already really strong. So, anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, leave that like and subscribe. Stay tuned. I should have a tier list video coming up for you sometime soon. And for support 80 carry, definitely. And I'll try to do mid and maybe one other role over the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that. And that's going to be it. Have a good day. See everybody next time.